Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's LIBER session on libraries as open innovators and leaders. I'm still seeing attendees joining. We're up to 145 by now, but I'll just do my introduction slowly, and then we'll see if everyone's here. So, oh, it looks good. Looks like a steady 152. So I'm very pleased that you found the time to join us online after so many interesting sessions already. I hope you're experiencing the same thing as I am, being surprised that an online conference can be as interesting as it is turning out to be. My name is Hilde van Wijngaarden. I'm with the Library of the Free University of Amsterdam. And as a member of the Programming Committee and the LIBER Executive Board, I have the honor of moderating this session. This afternoon, we are going to talk about new roles for librarians, open innovators and leaders. And we will do that with three very interesting presentations. But first, the ground rules. Almost forgot about them. This session is recorded. If you have any problems with that, you can just enter or leave the session, but this will be recorded so we can see it afterwards. And everybody that couldn't join today can join later. If you have any questions for the speakers, type them in the attendee chat. And if you experience any technical issues, check your settings and rejoin if that doesn't work. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to the session itself. New roles for librarians. I think we are all experiencing the different topics that we are working on and the different roles that we take on doing that. In this session, we'll see in what ways libraries organize their support for open access and open science and how they are taking on new roles in an even more broader sense than that. First, as teachers, learning students how to publish, we'll hear about the experiences in Helsinki. And then by spreading the word of open science throughout different groups in the universities by unboxing. I'm looking forward to hear what that is from Dublin. And at the end, our presentation from the colleagues in Utrecht is going to tell us about what all these new roles mean for a librarian and taking leadership in this area. So first, I would like to ask Markku Roinila to join us to give his presentation. He will present the presentation that has also been written by Kimmo Koskinen and Kati. Sorry, I was practicing, but I didn't manage. So excuse to your colleagues. Markku, can you please join us to start with your presentation?
Thank you. Maybe I'll say the names again, just in case. So yes. I'm Markku Roinila from the University of Helsinki Library, and with on Q&A are my colleagues Kimmo Koskinen and Kati Syvälahti. So let's start with some figures. Maybe the title, I could say that as well. So our title is Exploring Learning and Teaching Scholarly Publishing with Editori Open Journal Platform. And first, some figures from our library. We operate on 4 campuses. We have about 150 employees, 2 million customers visits annually, and 6 million downloaded electronic books and articles. Then I will say a few things about the contents of this presentation. First, we'll discuss Open Journal Systems, so OJS, as a tool for teaching and learning publishing. Then share some experiences from our pilot project, and then some ideas for further service development. On the right, you can see the picture of our portal page, open journal service called Editori, editor in Finnish. This is provided by the Helsinki University Library. It's based on open source software, Open Journal System, so OJS, which is very popular in open access journals. It's free to use for University of Helsinki researchers and students. The default license is CC BY. We also give the best and identifiers or DOIs to peer-reviewed articles. The maintenance and technical support is provided by the library. There are now 7 journals currently, and one is published maybe this week even. And 4 of them are peer-reviewed, and 1 is an overlay journal. Right from the beginning, Editori was also thought to be as a tool for teaching, especially open access publishing. So with that, you can learn peer reviewing, copy editing, submitting the journals, using licenses, person identifiers, etc. The platform enables creation of a number of different roles for different purposes, for different persons as well. So you can see on the right, there may be authors, reviewers, translators, editors, and so on. The articles submitted to the Editori platform in a similar way as the commercial journal platforms such as Scholar One or Manuscript Central. Then I will go to our pilot project 2019. This was created for a working seminar of the Doctoral Programme in Philosophy, Arts and Society on the Faculty of Arts. The theme of the seminar was representation, and it included 14 students from philosophy, art history, music, literature, and social sciences. Interdisciplinary approaches were encouraged. You can see on the right the picture of a mock journal, kind of pseudo journal, which was not visible to others than the course participants and teachers, and us library personnel, of course. It's called FTY journal. This was created by the library, and the students were asked to log into the journal and submit their papers as articles. The library personnel instructed the 3 teachers on how to use the platform and acted as technical support throughout the seminar. Here are some learning outcomes. When this course is completed, the students are able to do the following. They can discuss and define the different roles, that is author, editor, reviewer, in scholarly publishing. Carry out the double-blind peer review process in scholarly communication, and then describe and evaluate the impact of giving and receiving feedback. They can also apply the suggestions in the referees' reports and use the open journal systems as a platform for submitting the papers and reviews. Here's about the structure of the working seminar. The students submitted an article or PhD thesis chapter to the FTY journal in the Editori platform. The teachers found 2 referees for the article, one a student in the same course, and the other as a senior schooler working on the topic, usually from another university. Double-blind peer review was applied, then both authors and reviewers remained anonymous. The referees had 1 month to review the paper, and then students received the reports, which were also available to other seminar participants 1 week before the meeting. So in the closing seminar of the course, a 5-minute summary of the paper was given, then followed by discussion of peer review reports, that is, their quality and how to improve the paper and apply the suggestions in the reports. There were 2 separate groups, one for philosophy and one for other disciplines. So here's the picture of the process. First, the student submitted the article to the Editori, to the OJS platform, and then she wrote the peer review report of another student's paper. Then she got a peer review report from another student and also another referee who was usually an established scholar. And then in the closing seminar, she reflects on how to respond to criticism. Some roles for different groups. There's first the course leaders. There are 3 of them, 3 teachers, and 1 is journal manager taking care of the overall system, and then there are 2 journal editors, The students acted as authors and reviewers, so they submitted to the OGS. They received a request from the OGS to review, and they also submitted their review in the same platform. The external referees acted as reviewers, so there was first a review request from OGS from the FT White Journal, and then they submitted their review to the OGS as well. The library staff set up the mock journal. They instructed the 3 course leaders. Then they gave technical support for course leaders, students, and external reviewers, and participated as external experts to the closing seminar of the course. I might add that the persons involved in this were myself and Kimmo Koskinen, who's also present in Q&A. Here's some feedback from the students. In general, the Editori platform was thought to be intuitive, and some said that this forced to write an article even though one was writing a monograph format PhD thesis. So it was kind of an introduction to writing articles for some. The feedback helped to shape the articles, and it was thought useful that the author summarized the criticism in the seminar. The referees were polite and they did a thorough job. It was general understanding. And then some said, I learned how to write peer review reports and give constructive criticism. Here's teacher's feedback. This is from the course leader, José Felipe da Silva, says that in general he was happy with the results, and there were some challenges on learning the system, but there was enough technical support and instruction, and there were no major problems for either to teachers or to the students. He says that this service has true potential. Here are some library observations from the closing seminar. I might add that I have given about 10 university level courses myself, so I had some experience on how this thing works. So most doctoral students did not have previous experiences of submitting articles to journals, nor of rigorous blind peer reviewing or writing peer review reports. Trying out the process was in general thought to be useful, although some could guess who the student peer reviewer was. This is not so surprising because the groups were small and there were other people who knew each other already beforehand. This was less the case with the external peer reviewers because they were usually from other universities. The peer reviews were useful for those who were planning to submit their articles to real journals. For example, criticism was given on including too much material or on the focus of the article. The process was really helpful in giving a picture of what kind of feedback can be anticipated and how one can answer the criticism. The experience increased the student writing skills and their understanding of what is required for successful article submission, as well as topics related to research ethics. Here are some outcomes and challenges. Among the outcomes, we could perhaps count the following: experiential learning for doctoral students in the roles of authors and reviewers. Submitting practices and editorial workflow in scientific journals becomes familiar and digital skills are improved. Experience of double-blind peer review. Students receive useful feedback from referees, quality improvement. The quality of the papers was improved, and this is of course great. And then OGS was suited to train in scholarly publishing. The pilot can be extended to other teaching programs. So in the future we can apply this same system to other projects. And some challenges. The core pilot project was focused on skills for scholarly publishing, and open access was not really emphasized. And there was a learning curve for course leaders, which will be explained in the next slide. Technical support and instruction from the library should be available, that is clear. Requires coordination between teachers and the library. No systematic feedback collection from teachers and students was collected, and this is something that we should do in the future. I will now go to some of the details. First, about the challenges faced by the teachers. The learning curve with OGS was found steep by teachers. And it's true, it's not something that you can learn in 1 hour. It takes about day or two to really get to know the system and the platform. The introductory session of 2 hours was organized by the library to teachers. In addition, there were dozens of emails and occasional support visits by the librarians. Written instructions were found to be useful, so we wrote these instructions very early on. The teachers were very motivated and interested in the possibilities of OTS in teaching, and that of course helped a lot because we didn't have to force them to learn this new platform. And then technical support chances for the library. At the time, there were one major problem, and that was the login process. At the time, one could only log into the Editori platform with the University of Helsinki credentials. And this was a problem because the idea in the course was that the external referees are usually from other universities. So they could not log into the download the paper nor submit the review report on the manuscript. And of course, this caused the daily problems within a few weeks. There was a few weeks that were rather hectic because we had to act as intermediaries, sending papers to reviewers and reports to teachers. Fortunately, there were not a lot of these papers. And then here in the right, you can see that this problem is now fortunately history because we have now 3 ways to log into the platform with the University of Helsinki account, then with the National Haka Federation account, and then with a separate account where the editor of the journal gives the username and the password to the author. Some lessons learned. The OTS requires some learning, so it's not reasonable to provide a service for short-term purposes such as one-off seminar. Then everyone should be able to log into the platform anywhere without any problems, so it should be kind of universal admittance to the system, because you never know where people might log in from. And the CAPTCHA is very useful for reducing email spam. The technical support is essential before and during the course, because you really cannot anticipate the problems beforehand. And then written instructions prove to be useful, so it's useful to write instructions in black and white, so people can refer to them easily. Then about teacher-librarian collaboration, communication between the library staff and teachers is essential. And it's important that the library is involved already in the planning phase of the course, and this was the case in our pilot project. And it's very useful because the teachers can design the course according to the platform requirements, and also the library personnel can anticipate some of the technical problems that might take into place. We actually failed to do this, as I said earlier, because we didn't anticipate the login problems that were a big problem. And then also the importance of systematic collection of feedback for developing the editorial service. And this is something that we did not do, so we will do that in the future. A bit of discussion. The main goal, teaching publishing practices and peer review process to doctoral students was a success. And of course, it's the most important thing. The students liked it and the teachers found the method useful. Students were given a possibility to practice peer review reports with writing, which many found important. After the course, the readiness to submit articles to scientific journals and skills to deal with peer review process were significantly improved, which is a plus, of course. And then the students have now some experience with peer reviewing, so they can be assigned to these tasks. We all know that many of the journals find difficulties in finding peer reviewers, so the students have now some learning on this, so they might be employed as reviewers in the future. We did a bit of benchmarking. Here's another journal from Canada called Emerging Library and Information Perspectives, or AIP. This is also an open access double-blind peer review journal, and it's published by the Faculty of Information and Many Studies, Cadet Library, and hosted by the Western Libraries through OGS. This publishes original student research, critical essays, reflections for and from the field, as well as interviews, reviews, and multimodal content. The idea in the journal is that there will be Students are acting as an editorial team, so the students in each course will act as the editorial team of the journal. And in the end of the course, the journal will be published. And so it remains as a kind of testament or living proof of that this course has taken place. And this is something that our FTY journal did not do. So because the open access was not addressed in the pilot project and the journal and the papers remain unpublished. And we actually don't have any student-led journals represented in the Editori platform. So in the future, we hope to have some of these journals present as the ELIB and also one called Journal of Purdue Undergraduate Research. Actually, there seems to be a lot of these student-led open access journals. So we are hoping that at some point we will be acquiring one. Publishing the articles or presentations, posters, videos, etc. would give a new open access dimension to learning outcomes. One can learn about licensing, persistent identifiers, promoting open access articles and journals, etc. And also post-publication comments are possible with the Hypothesis ES plugin. Also, the OGS enables open peer reviewing process. So that would be a great addition to the peer reviewing and article submitting experiences. So, and also we hope that the students can be assigned to editorial roles in these future projects. But we have some other kinds of projects this year with pedagogical focus. One is called Neuropsy Open, which publishes selected review articles from specialization course in neuropsychology. The first issue came out a few weeks ago. And the idea here is that usually when students write these review articles, they are kept hidden in the closed platforms. But in this case, they will be published open access, so the other students may learn from them. Another journal is called Journal for Reproducibility in Neuroscience, which is a startup journal run by early career researchers at the medical campus. The idea is that this is kind of training journal, so the early career researchers can train editing and managing the journal and the peer reviewing posts, etc. So this is something that will be issued in maybe this week already. Some initiatives that did not take off. One is journal in art history, where the idea was that there will be original works of art shared, but the problems with the CC BY license that we require kind of folded this project because they didn't want to share the images with the CC BY license. Another one is a journal from a course in journalism. This was a course where the students focused on layout, kind of very good-looking layouts and lots of good-looking high-class photographs, etc. And the OGS platform is not that good for that purpose, so that's why we didn't actually, it didn't come true in the end. And that's about it. Thank you very much. We are very happy to hear your thoughts and comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Markku, for this interesting story about teaching how to publish. I'm already seeing a few questions in the chat that we can immediately address. I'm looking at a question from Pekka Osbo. Do you think that Editori could be used also for teaching the facts of open access in the future? And another question from Trudy Turner is also relating to the question of teaching about open access. After these questions were posed, you already explained a little bit about future plans, including open access, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that question.
Yeah, so we hope to have one student-led journal in a course where we could show them how the open access journal is made and then publish it. But this is something that we don't have yet, so hopefully we'll have that in the future. But I guess that would be a very nice way to teach open access on how when students can see themselves on the kind of benefits of open access and see that their articles are immediately as readable and so on, and the use of licenses, identifiers, and kind of promoting one's writings as well. Actually, we have one overlay journal in the Editori portal. It's called Think Open Digest. It collects. We have a blog about open access, which collects blogs on certain themes. So there might be a theme issue on data management and one on open access and so on. So that is also one way to teach open access, because there is a collection of some theme-related blogs in one issue. And they are all, of course, open access.
Thank you. That is a nice next step to take. The good thing about your co-authors being in the audience is that one of the questions is already being answered in the chat. A question about the use of the OJS system. We're hearing here that you had to learn about using it, and also the teachers had to learn about using it. And that's quite an accomplishment if you did all that and then can set up this project as well. Wasn't that a difficult step to take?
Yes, well, we noted that the written instructions are very useful, because there are lots of, in the OJS, there are lots of different kind of things to remember, and you cannot really do that after you learn 2 hours about this. So it's useful to have some kind of black and white referee where you can turn to when you have problems. But actually, there were a lot of, I didn't count, but there were dozens of emails as well on how do I do this, and why is this behaving like this, and so on and so on. So it takes some time, but you get to be a master when you rehearse a bit.
And you can teach about it, so that's a good thing. Thank you very much, Markku. I think we'll move on to the next presentation, and if there are any other questions for you, we can come back to them when we have a general discussion at the end. Thank you very much for now.
Okay, thank you.
And so now we're clicking to the next presentation. And that is about unboxing open scholarship. It's a presentation by Shane Collins and Siobhan Dunn from Trinity College Dublin. And I'm very curious about what an unboxing is. So please come up on the stage, on the virtual stage, and tell us about it.
Thank you, Hilda. I hope everyone can hear me. Good afternoon from Dublin. My name is Siobhan Dunn, and I work in the library in Trinity College Dublin. And I'll be presenting today with my colleague Shane Collins, who is a research fellow in the Science Foundation Ireland funded Connect Centre in Trinity. So those of you that were at LIBER last year will recognise this image from Front Square. It's a very rainy picture of Front Square, and I'm delighted to say we're very sunny today in Dublin. It's actually very warm. So today we're going to talk to you about our experience of a programme of and initiatives around open scholarship that we've worked on over the last year. And it's important to point out that when we talk about open scholarship here, we are talking about open science, but we call it open scholarship to be cognizant of our colleagues in arts, humanities and social sciences. So that's why we phrase it around open scholarship. So we've been unfortunately unable to go into our own campus over recent months. And I don't know if any of you have been following Normal People on your screens. So this Normal People was a work of fiction written by a Trinity graduate called Sally Rooney. And the screen version of that was directed by some Trinity graduates as well. So it's a very much a Trinity story, and it's been a great opportunity, as I say, for some of us to remember what it's like to be in the physical environment. And so we've been lucky to follow that over recent weeks. So So before we get into open scholarship itself and the initiative, as I say, that we're going to cover today, I guess it's important to give you some context, I guess, to the Trinity Open Scholarship journey to date. And there's been an awful lot of activity on this over the last number of years. And our colleague in the library, Niamh Brennan, has kindly given us this slide as a way to illustrate really all the activity that has been going on around open scholarship. So, I mean, Niamh herself has been an absolutely amazing proponent and ambassador for open scholarship, and has been a member of a number of national, European and international expert groups around this. Trinity was the first university in Ireland to adopt an open access policy. Our institutional repository has over 40,000 items in it. You know, there's been other initiatives that we've been involved in as well, such as the DARAT repository as part of TARA. And this is, you know, sort of an innovation around providing access to research in accessible formats. So be that, you know, a plain English summary accompanied by Irish Sign Language translation, and you know, giving additional outputs to all of our communities. And then, of course, in more recent years, then as well, we have initiatives that most people will be familiar with around, you know, the increasing momentum around Plan S. We've had recently the LIRU Open Science Roadmap as well. And all of these have come together in a perfect storm in recent, you know, in the last 18 months or so, to trigger us in Trinity to think around establishing a sort of a community of practice around how we think through what open scholarship means for our community. And so what we have done in the last 18 months or so is that, excuse me, I'll just get the right slide here, is that we have set up a task force on open scholarship, and that has been set up by our librarian and college archivist, Helen Shenton, and our Dean of Research, Linda Doyle. And again, any of you that participated in last year's conference will remember Linda gave a keynote on around Trinity and research, and it was a fantastic talk. But Helen and Linda were very keen to set up this task force really to think about, well, there was a number of reasons why this task force was set up. I've mentioned already the consultation calls that were necessary. We also wanted to look at, you know, what is the Trinity's community's understanding of what open scholarship means to them. You know, to think about what people on the ground at a grassroots level understand by open scholarship. And what are the big questions of the day that were coming up around open scholarship as well. So there was, you know, a regular meeting of this task force. I think last count there's about 21 members on the task force, and really I think the beauty of it was that it was a melting pot of people from across the board. So, you know, colleagues in the library were obviously involved. Research support professionals were involved. We had senior human resources colleagues, we had colleagues from IT services, we had faculty deans involved, and a number of other colleagues across the campus. We also involved students as well. By the very nature of the membership of the group, it was funny, Shane and I were just commenting on this earlier, how agile and flexible the membership was. So for example, on one of our first events that we looked at, we co-opted an early career researcher onto the task force because they had shown such interest and such passion around open scholarship, and we wanted to bring in their expertise and learn from them. So it was a very much an ad hoc group. It wasn't a formal structure, it wasn't a formal committee. It did report into our research committee, but by the nature of the way it was set up, it was very agile and flexible and could be responsive and I guess experimental in the way that we address the questions around open scholarship. So why unbox open scholarship, and what do we mean by unboxing open scholarship? I mentioned, so the task force was, you know, looking at, you know, formally responding to consultations and various pieces of policy that were happening around open scholarship and open science. But we also, importantly, as I mentioned, really wanted to unpack what open scholarship meant to our community and not just have a top-down approach, here's the policy. We really wanted to learn from and understand from colleagues across the board what were the issues, what were the concerns, what were the barriers around open scholarship practice for people. And so that's where the term, and I think it was our Dean of Research came up with it initially, branded the brand Unboxing Open Scholarship, that we would set out a year of events to unpick and unpack what open scholarship meant to the community. And that's really where it was born. This was very much happening in the context of a number of strategic initiatives. So we had the university strategic plan, our own library strategic plan would have mentioned or committed to open access. And our new Dean of Research at the time, Linda Doyle, was very much forming the new research strategy and the research charter. And so this was all, you know, in the context of the timing of all of this. I think crucially to the ethos of unboxing open scholarship and that community was to build capacity and understanding amongst the stakeholders, to critically reflect on what we were doing, to take our learning outside maybe more formal training and learning, and just to really open up conversations around open scholarship and to gather intelligence at a community base as well. That would then help us inform policy and our practice going forward. It was very much as well cognizant of the different disciplinary approaches to open scholarship practice. And as I mentioned earlier, we were very, very cognizant of including colleagues and researchers from all disciplines and learning from colleagues from all disciplines and absolutely understanding that one size does not fit all. And so I think the beauty of the events that unfolded, and I'll talk about those in a moment, was that we could learn from each other and bring together maybe people that wouldn't usually come together to discuss this, to understand disciplinary difference, and to acknowledge, I suppose, concerns and worries about what open scholarship means for me as an individual researcher. So this slide really just gives you a sense of the shape of unboxing open scholarship and really the year of events that unfolded from that, those original initial discussions around unboxing open scholarship with our community. The items on the left of the screen were events that we would have advertised to the broader community outside of the university. And the events on the right-hand side of the screen would have been more conversation opportunities for within Trinity, although we did open some of them up as well to the outside Trinity community. We wanted to start at the beginning and understand what it meant to different groups to workshop their ideas around it. Even starting with how do we define what open scholarship is? What are those barriers that are maybe out there around open scholarship? What are my concerns around it? And so the first of a couple of events we held were a number of workshops, and we repeated these workshops so that we could maximize the number of people that could come to them. And so we asked people to brainstorm and workshop all of the above, and then we would bring it together and use that learning and understanding that we gained from those initial workshops to help us to create the programme for the remaining events that would run for the rest of the year. And so we did hold those workshops at various locations across campus. We were very keen to involve as much diversity as possible. The image there in the middle you will see is an event we held in our science gallery. And so we were leaning on the expertise of colleagues in science communication, not just as a venue, but also we brought in colleagues to enrich the conversations we were having around open scholarship. And this is an image here of Professor Mike Eisen, who gave a fantastic overview of, he's the editor-in-chief of eLife, and gave a fantastic overview of future possibilities for the for research outputs and for research impact, and totally deconstructing the traditional paradigm that's out there around the journal being the natural container for research outputs. So that was a fantastic event. It was a lot of fun involved, very informal, and that was, I guess, the stamp across all of our events. They were fun, they were experimental. We were very conscious of making sure all of our audiences were included, and you'll see our colleague who was a driving force on the task force, Lorraine Leeson, would have delivered the presentation through Irish Sign Language, so being as inclusive as possible all the way through. So as I say, we built on each event. We reflected on each event. At the start, we had those introductory workshops. Then we decided, there were these very obvious themes emerging from those initial conversations. And so themes around funding, quality assurance, incentivization, and transparency for researchers, and also equity and inclusion. Those 4 themes were ones that were coming out again and again in all of our events. And Shane will talk about those in more detail a little later on. We were very keen to use social media as well, and just a word of warning: we came up with a hashtag unboxing open scholarship, which was interesting, but it wasn't used by everybody. So that was a learning point for us. So yeah, these are some of the events, and all of the events that we are covering here today, details of them are available on our website. We had about 12 events during the year. Over almost 800 people participated, and I think the crucial thing about all the events is that they did spear a lot of conversation around open scholarship, which is exactly what we wanted. And as I say, the informality of these really helped with the conversation. One event, or a series of events, I just want to share with you, and I'm very passionate about, was events we had around citizen science. So we had some TC Trinity College graduates who had developed this app called Access Earth, and we decided as part of our postgraduate week to bring the student and staff community together to do a little bit of mapping of the accessibility of venues around Dublin, and that brought the community together. It actually spearheaded conversations. There's an image down here in the corner of Bewley's, which is a cafe in Dublin, and the owner of that cafe, understanding that accessibility was not good and not up to scratch in their venue, started a conversation around that and actually implementing change. And then we had a workshop after the event where we discussed some of the issues that came up in that mapping event, and then as well to amplify it at European Researchers' Night, to share the stories, the human stories around research, and the impact and the power of the individual in delivering citizen science. So that was a personal highlight for me of the year of events. And I know Shane is going to talk us through now a little bit around the learning that we had from unboxing. So I'll hand over to Shane.
Thanks very much. I think you can all hear me there. So yeah, as you've heard, timing was really key. And so when the task force was convened at the end of 2018, a lot of important things happened. And for once, we're not talking about Plan S here. We're talking about our own institutional strategies were being developed, and the research strategy was in development. And there was a research charter as well, which would espouse a number of principles that to support our research. And so at that time, even though the task force, as you've heard, sat outside of the realm of formal processes within the university, we were able to influence these type of documents and focus because of the membership that we had on the group. So I think that's an important thing. If people are looking to replicate elsewhere, having individuals who have a key say in what happens in the university involved is really key from the get-go. And in the actual in the university strategy, it's stated very clearly that we should lead on open scholarship and promote open access publication. So we think that's really good that that statement is there. And of course, we have been leading in this area for many years. We've got academics like Jennifer Edmond, who many of you will know, and of course, Niamh Brennan has been mentioned as well, who's been championing this cause for years and years. But what I want to highlight at this juncture that another important part is that when you're looking at open scholarship, it's important to look at it from the broadest perspective. And in the institutional strategy, where that goal of lead on open scholarship and promote open access publication was identified, it was aligned with civic action organisation and our research parts of our mission. It actually wasn't identified as a part of our education mission. And I think that goes back to the fact that timing is so important. We focused strongly at the very beginning on kind of the research side of things for open scholarship, and it was only later at which we got to the open education side of things. So I think this is something to kind of bear in mind. There are 21 institutional actions associated with the with Trinity's strategic plan. So there are ways in which we'll incorporate open education as a cross-cutting theme outside of that. But just again, timing is key. If you're going to focus on something, you need to make sure that, particularly when there's an institutional strategy being developed, that you do it in a sequential way that works for you. And then some other learning was focused on the community response that we received. So Siobhan has identified that we, a couple of themes that came that arose from it. And then on top of that as well, we really found that the student power aspect was incredible, and I'll detail that now. So just moving on to funding. So here you'll see on the left-hand side, we have an early career researcher who points to how their scholarship was not valued because it wasn't a revenue generator. And so whilst funding is paramount to this, it certainly goes beyond funding. It represents kind of a deeper reflection on the imbalance that exists within the research system, particularly in how disciplines are valued and resourced and the ways in which researchers are pushed towards research fields that are considered worthy of funding. It also represents a very narrow view of impact, but it highlights the need for systematic change to address this. And the systematic change was something that consistently came up across all of our events. On the top right, you see that there's an academic who stated that they're under increasing pressure. And of course, anyone working in a university environment will say, will be able to relate to that. We're expected to do more and more with less and less. But it also identifies the need for universities to kind of ask us to do things, but to make sure that the supports and resources are in place for us to be actually able to do that. And then the third quote captures the kind of need for smart investment in sustainable infrastructures to support open access publishing, citizen science, data storage, all of these things. And so while it's widely believed that wherever possible, one of the things that came across from our meetings and our groups was that wherever new infrastructure is being developed, that it should be community owned. And so I guess in a shared vision for open scholarship in the context of funding is that, we need additional resources, of course, but we need to go beyond this and deliver systematic change and make sure that the new infrastructure is community owned. In the area of quality assurance, you see here that some respondents equated open access with poor peer review standards, often because participants new to open access equated this with APCs, and APCs were believed to create perverse economic incentives for publishers to simply publish anything. So at an early event, Siobhan, you'll recall this, we had a researcher who said that this is simply not the case. They had a paper rejected from PLOS One, and that that was unequivocal evidence that open access does not equate poor peer review standards. But I think take from that what you will, but it's indicative of the type of kind of peer-to-peer interaction that went on at these events. So there was a lot of community learning that I guess speaks to the open community part of open scholarship. And then we also include the quote here from Professor Mike Eisen, who, as Siobhan mentioned, he said a really thought-provoking talk and gets to the heart of the issue regarding quality. So we need to break free from the idea that the only way of doing things, quality is based on on where you publish as opposed to what you publish. And so that's something that we need to break the kind of the psychological barriers that are in place around that. And to realize this vision, requires a set of conditions, which brings us to our next slide, which is incentivization and transparency. And transparency was something that came up throughout our events. We had a symposium in September that dealt with research impact and evaluation and DORA. And it was where the faculty research metrics for the 3 faculties in Trinity were presented. And for some, it was the first time that they had seen research metrics outside their own faculty. For others, it was the first time they saw their own metrics, but that was more down to the fact that these metrics had been changed more recently. It does underpin, though, the need to communicate these things effectively when changes of this nature are made. And of course, when you Transparency also was evident in how honest participants were in these events. So we had an established researcher very clearly state the type of difficulties that are facing early career researchers in embracing this new system with the amount of risks that are in place. Perfect. I'm going to hurry up here. In the area of incentivization, the community response largely aligned with what was recommended elsewhere. So there was support for use of open scholarship metrics, for internal awards, promotion, good data management practices, etc. One of the key things, though, is that where we're considering these type of metrics, it's important that we look at the type of unintended consequences they can have, and to remember that open scholarship, for different disciplines, they're at different stages along this evolution, and so we need to be make sure that we're cognizant of those. And then equity and inclusion, that relates directly to it. It's hard to get away from the financial realities, as you'll see on the slides here. And funding is the currency of power in academia. So when you dig deeper, you see there are real issues of inclusion here, unintended consequences of moving towards open access because of certain economic models that are exclusionary for authors at different career stages, at certain disciplines, geographical regions, and of how the move towards open access may entrench further divisions in academia. I mean, these were all very strong points that were coming back from the community, and none of this is new. I mean, we know about this. It's a lot of reports have been done about these kinds of things, but it's really powerful that that's communicated back from your own community when you're trying to make change within the institution itself. And so I guess a shared vision for open scholarship then, as reflected by our community, is one where Trinity embraces open scholarship in an inclusive and conscionable way. And I'm just very quickly going to talk about the student power piece. So undoubtedly working with students and their organizations proved hugely successful. Siobhan has kind of detailed what we did in the citizen science arena. The task force also initiated things like a 2-year student open access project called Soapbox, working with a subset of Trinity's 23 student-led publications. And then they were using the OGS platform to publish as well. And there was also workshops there in peer review and publishing ethics. And it's really a strong constructivist pedagogical way of engaging with this type of material. And it gave us an insight into the depth and breadth of research that went on in Trinity, because students are constantly involved in research. They're the early career researchers, and they're the future. So, and it was really great to see that their commitment to the SDGs and liberating knowledge came to the fore. And also we found that by working with students, it had this amplification effect. So they actually went and hosted their own unboxing style events. So, for example, the representative body for Trinity Student Publications hosted a fantastic exhibition in January that detailed the history of their publications, dating back to 1895, and closely referenced the goals of open scholarship, and we're contemplating what open scholarship would have looked like in 1895. And then, of course, you'll see on the top right-hand corner there's our Dean of Research at this exhibition as well. Even the Pirate Society got in on the act, and they facilitated talks on open source and did hackathons and whatnot. So another recommendation arising out of our work would be to engage deliberately with your student communities and their representative groups. They're particularly fantastic at advocacy, and God knows we need as much of that as we possibly can. And the very last slide, we're on to reflection. So we think the big takeaway is that when developing a shared vision for open scholarship, inclusion really matters. It's a cross-cutting theme, I suppose, in ways that was present since we began, by deliberately using the term open scholarship, etc. And when we were looking at the programme and what type of events to host, we were constantly conscious of the fact, we need to make sure that they're as inclusive as possible. And then at the same time, if you want to build a committed community that's dedicated to open scholarship, we think the approach we took was quite impactful. And the role of the library in particular has been hugely significant, and certainly went beyond any notion that a library is a building that where knowledge is stored. It was really central to building this community and bringing together a cohort of people who, in all likelihood, unless the task force was constituted, we wouldn't have had. So just you can read this quote here at the slides will be circulated, I'm sure, afterwards. Just a provocative way to look at, and what it tells us is that we need to do what's within the realm of our own possibilities. We can't be waiting for other people to tell us what to do, and there's a lot that we can do and what we should do. Thanks a million to LIBER, thanks to Niamh Brennan as well for providing a slide for the presentation and leading the cause for many years, to the Open Scholarship Task Force, and to the co-chairs Helen Shenton and Linda Doyle, and also to the various speakers who were involved. And you can see here we have the LibGuides website if you want to see some more information. Thank you so much.
Hilda, you are muted, so unfortunately we cannot hear you.
Oh, I've been talking a long time without being heard. So good thing you let me know. So you had a chance to just get a little bit of rest after this nice presentation, and I'll start again. Thank you very much. It's good to see that there are many compliments in the chat. Not that many questions at this point, and that's a good thing because we're running out of time, and I would like to save some time for a more general discussion at the end. So I think immediately we are going to move to the presentation from Utrecht University Library. That's Martine Pronk and Koen Wilders. Can you come up and tell us about what you are doing to shape leadership in a changing world?
Yes, thank you, Hilda, and thanks to the LIBER committee for organizing this wonderful conference online. And welcome to you all to our presentation, Shaping Leadership in a Changing World. I'm really happy to see so many of you here today. And as we have seen in the previous two presentations and have been seeing throughout the entire conference, the role of the university libraries and the services they provide are rapidly changing. And in this presentation, we will not focus so much on these new roles of the library or on new services, but it will mainly be on how we, from an organizational perspective, work on these new roles and services. How do we manage the constant changes we are facing and keep everyone in and outside the library on board? And in this talk, we would like to share that we at Utrecht University Library feel an urgent need to further shape leadership within our organization and to keep up with the constantly changing environment around us. And we focus in this talk on three aspects. In Utrecht, we are guided by an ambitious vision. We place responsibilities as low in the organization as possible, and we focus on results and personal development at all levels of the organization. And we hope that sharing our experiences and challenges we face helps you to reflect on the way you shape leadership within your library too. And we are looking forward to have a discussion with you afterwards. But let us first introduce ourselves briefly so that you can place our talk and what we do in perspective. We are Martine Pronk and Koen Wilders, that's me, respectively sector manager and department manager at the sector academic services at Utrecht University Library. And our sector is responsible for research and education support at our university, which is the largest university in the Netherlands and based in the center of our beloved country. And our university is quite old, originating from 1636. And currently we have more than 30,000 students and more than 7,000 staff members. And Utrecht University Library has a centralized library organization, and that is based in two locations. The Old Palace of Louis Napoleon in the city center and the modern library at Utrecht Science Park. And we support the broad spectrum of both science and scholarship. And this is, of course, heavily influencing all that we do also when it comes down to how we manage change. Martine.
So, after this very brief introduction, let's start with the first aspect of leadership we would like to highlight. In Utrecht, we are guided by an ambitious vision. For long, it was clear for everybody what a university library stands for, but as the world around us changed, this stable image also changed. There's an increasing need for a clear vision on what the future role of the university library is. Not only to make researchers aware of the new role of the library, but also to bring everybody in the organization in a changing mood. What we in Utrecht propagate comes basically down to that we want to translate our traditional expertise on scientific information into a world that is increasingly more open and digital, in accordance with FAIR principles. Probably the most striking example of how this works for us is the role of the library in searching and finding scientific literature. A huge paradigm shift has been taking place in this field. Our users do not longer use our local discovery tools in order to find information. And they're quite right so, as what we own as a library is increasingly a smaller part of what is available worldwide and could be relevant for scientists or scholars. As many of you might know, at Utrecht University, we embraced this reality. Our ambition is to make sure that our researchers get excellent support for the discovery of scientific literature wherever it takes place, and equally good delivery wherever that literature is found. So while in 2012, we focused on local discovery and delivery via local catalogues of our own Utrecht collection, now, almost a decade later, we do not longer provide our users with a preferred discovery tool. Instead, we've decided to invest our time and money to support worldwide discovery and delivery via multiple other ways. But we do not only focus on the discovery and delivery of scientific information. Our expertise of making this information openly available in accordance with the FAIR principles is relevant in many aspects of the research cycle. We're developing ourselves from curators who build collections to advisors and consultants on scientific information, who also provide services on how to share information, for instance, or in the creating process of researchers. Well, this may sound obvious, but it's not. Making room for these new services was only possible by making hard choices. For instance, related to our role in the field of discovery and delivery, we had to decide to no longer maintain our own catalogue for local discovery, although especially scholars up to this day expect to see one at our library website. Moreover, this choice has huge implications for our cataloging team on both modern and special collections, who need to work on a new supporting role in the research cycle. And of course, not everybody in and outside the organization is happy with the choices we make. However, we think these choices are necessary to make our organization future-proof, and our vision does help us to explain why we make those choices and make it clear to both library employees and to faculty what the library stands for. And this is probably best illustrated by the third example. We chose not to build a discovery tool specifically for Utrecht University research data. This is a request we received more than once from faculty who had trouble finding the data material from their colleagues and wanted to make their own data better findable and visible. And when they thought of a catalogue, of course, the library wasn't top of their mind. However, we kindly refused this request, and we explained that building a local discovery tool was not in line with our ideas that when it comes down to discovery and delivery, one should not think about local solutions, but should think on how to make your data findable and available wherever you as a researcher want to present them. Most of the time, this will be in discipline-specific repositories. And we do support those researchers to make their data easy to find by focusing on metadata and persistent identifiers. Our vision helps us to make those choices and explain them and to provide faculty with the kind of support that is future-proof. So how do we organize the realization of our vision into new services? Well, therefore, a second aspect of how we shape leadership is important. We place responsibilities as low in the organization as possible. In Utrecht, we concluded that in order to meet all the challenges we face, we needed to work on our organizational culture. We come from a culture that is, on the one hand, quite hierarchical, with procedures that determine what we do. We've organized ourselves basically in such a way to make sure that our acquisition processes were running smoothly and efficient. We were proud to be a stable, reliable partner for scientists and scholars who needed help. On the other hand, our culture could also be defined by what one could call a clan culture, a friendly working environment, like a family, where loyalty and tradition are very important values. Although to a great respect, we have these cultural characteristics within our DNA, and we still have them, and are happy to have them. We also concluded that this type of organizational culture is not very good in handling constant change. So to keep up with the dynamic environment we're in, we needed to be more flexible, to have more focus on user needs and getting to results a lot faster than we were used to. And in order to do so, we chose to place responsibilities as low in the organization as possible. In our view, it is inconceivable that all of the challenges we envision could be realized top-down. We experienced that to a high level, the realization of new forms of services are based on the input of our own experts. Therefore, we say managers should no longer tell our employees exactly what to do. Instead, they increasingly have the role to facilitate by translating the organization's strategy into a framework for employees. And at the same time, give employees time, resources, and very important, trust to get to the desired results. This type of leadership is extremely important to us. So how does this form of leadership work in practice? And let us take our academic services division as an example. One way we place responsibilities as low in the organization as possible is by organizing ourselves in teams. These teams are responsible for specific services grouped around a topic. The teams consist of different experts who together support and inform researchers, lecturers, and students, monitor usage by a data-driven approach, do trend watching, come up with ideas to improve the services, etc., etc. How they come to the results and how they organize themselves is to a large extent the responsibility of the teams themselves. The way these teams function is amazing. And here in this slide, I would like to show you an example, two posters from our yearly poster session. In this event, at the beginning of the year, all teams present their achievements in the past year and what they plan to achieve this year. We see a lot of ownership within the teams for making sure that the services they provide are in line with user needs and with the library's vision. And we receive a lot of input from the teams on how our services should develop and what is needed in order to do so. This new way of working, however, is not solely the result of another way of managing or of reshaping the organizational chart. absolutely crucial in managing change in our library is the focus on results and personal development. These two are heavily intertwined, and at all levels of the organization, we all, at a personal level, need to take up leadership in order to make change happen, not only in the services we provide, but also in how we provide those services. As librarians, we're developing ourselves from curators who build collections to advisors and consultants on scientific information. And therefore, we need a whole set of new competencies. Moreover, working in a new organizational culture that is more result-oriented and more external focused also influences the set of skills we all need. To keep up with the many changes we face, everyone in the organization must demonstrate leadership in working on its own development. Managers, for instance, have to develop new leadership styles, which is impossible without developing a new set of skills and learn to act differently. And for instance, we need everybody in the organization on board to tell a coherent story of the library outwards. Whether it be in the managerial conversation with the chairman of the executive board, during highly specialized support for researchers, or training for first-year students, everyone in the library must be able to explain what the library stands for and is moving towards. So to facilitate leadership that is both oriented on results and personal development, we do many things. One way, of course, is by setting up recruitment policy. Every time we had a vacant position, we thought carefully on the profile of the new candidate. What kind of expertise, competences, or skills do we need in order to develop ourselves? And as a result, the last few years, very often we recruited former PhD candidates. We advertise our job applications both in Dutch and in English to attract a more diverse group of potential new colleagues. However, to a large extent, the changes in this respect were made with the current staff. In order to facilitate them in their development, we maintain a generous development budget, and we stimulate that they train each other to make sure that expertise spreads throughout the organization. And very important, we emphasize that employees are ultimately responsible for their own development and secure this every year in a personal development plan that holds both results and goals for personal growth. Koen.
Yes, however, if there's one thing we want to underline in this talk, it is probably that shaping leadership in a world that is constantly changing is a never-ending story. For example, we constantly need to be aware that it takes time and effort to fully understand the implications of a vision like we hold in Utrecht. And if we as managers cannot understand the meaning of it, then how can we explain it to our teams? And how can our employees tell a coherent story to faculty? And we need to constantly work on building on a shared set of goals and values and keep explaining our images of the future in order to keep everyone in and outside the library on board. Another thing we are constantly working on is what are the results we envision for our services. For instance, how to measure the quantitative and qualitative success of the services that are quite new. With the input from the teams and with the help of a data-driven advisor, we are improving ourselves in this respect, but to be honest, we have still a lot to learn. And this is only a small part of the many challenges we are facing while shaping our leadership. And what to do, for instance, with the large amount of new and very scarce expertise that is needed to build on services for the near future. Where do you find them and how do you keep them? And how do you organize yourself to maximize the range of your services and keep it manageable within the available resources? And And how can we take care of employees who are unable or unwilling to participate in the new services and who saw the world change so rapidly that they cannot or don't want to keep up with those changes? Expecting from everybody in the library to be a leader is, of course, not the same as that everybody is able or willing to be one. And these are all huge challenges with no easy answers. And it's an extremely complicated puzzle, probably more complicated than we ever faced as a library. However, it's time to come to a conclusion. In Utrecht, we choose to reshape leadership in the library in order to keep up with the constantly changing world around us. And we hope this talk has given you an impression on how we deal with this. Are we there yet? No. They say it takes about 7 years to accomplish a culture change, and to be honest, we think it will be never finished. The change is here to stay, and so are we working on leadership in our library. We hope we have been giving you food for thought to think on how you manage change in your library as well. And many thanks for your attention, and we are looking forward to have a discussion on this topic with you.
Thank you very much, Koen and Martine. This is a very interesting development at your library. I'm looking at the chat, and I have one specific question already for you about, of course, your local search engine. Do you collaborate with the larger open discovery infrastructure to make sure that the University of Utrecht research outputs are still visible and discoverable? That's a question from Peter Krake.
Yeah, I was looking at Koen, sorry about that. Yes, of course, we're part of the WorldCat community. So, of course, we are part of the larger worldwide community. And that's, of course, the context that we're working in. So, no, we're not doing anything specifically by ourselves, but heavily relying on all the facilities that are out there. But the thing that we changed is that we would like to be where researchers are looking for scientific information, and we're not asking them to come to us. So that's the change that we made. So we are trying to find platforms and places where researchers are and try to make sure that that's where our Utrecht University output is best findable and available, and etc.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to a question more about the second part of your presentation, a question by Marta Bustillo. Can you talk a little bit more about how you trained managers to deliver this type of organizational change?
Yes. We as a management team had a whole set of trainings and sessions together to talk about what kind of leadership we want in the library, and to talk many hours about what does it mean in the current situation, and what kind of behavior do we need to show. And well, this was very helpful in developing ourselves, but we also need to work on that even more. So that was the case. Almost a year we had quite a few days during that year that we trained ourselves with the help of trainers who were experts on organizational development, etc.
Maybe I may add to that as well, that we had quite a few changes in our management team. Basically, almost the whole management team, apart from 2 people, changed over the past 5 years. So also with recruitment for new management people, we changed the job profile. So we could recruit for people who were experienced in being leaders in this kind of organization. One of the problems that we face now that most of us don't have a library background. So the challenge we have is to really understand where a library comes from and how we translate those values to the new organization that we would like to be. And that's part of the coherent story that we would like to tell. So that's, on the other hand, a very interesting challenge that we have.
Yes, that's indeed, that's very interesting. And I'd like to continue on this discussion, and we'll ask the other presenters to join us, so we can have a more general discussion about this. And I was wondering, Markku and Siobhan and Shane, do you recognize the change that is happening in the organization in Utrecht? And while you are taking on new roles from your library, do you see that the requirements for your people and your management is changing like it has been in Utrecht?
For myself, I would say that it seems that every year is bringing something very new. So during the last year, I have learned how to publish open access books and journals, for example, with dozens of different things that are related to those things. And a bit of altmetrics and so on. So it seems that the work is evolving all the time. And you have to learn a lot for yourself, not really trusting on any kind of ready material.
Yeah, I might say that, you know, our experience as well from the Unboxing Open Scholarship and the task force, you know, having that melting pot of different skills and different contexts and different backgrounds is a sure track to facilitating a way for greater growth and learning. And I think it's really interesting to see libraries that are employing people that don't have a professional librarian background, because we're bringing in new skills all the time and learning all the time. And I'm sure, Shane, you'd agree that mix of expertise is really valuable in that growth piece. And I loved what you were saying there, Martine, about the clan culture. You know, it's almost like the grassroots community and bringing people together from different contexts and backgrounds. That's the only way we're going to learn, and that's the only way we're going to get to solutions to big research questions as well.
And is it one thing I'm always wondering about the development of your team and how you position yourself within your university? On the one hand, you want to explain what the library is doing and that the library is doing new things. On the other hand, you don't want to stress the fact that you're from the library. You want to work together as one group supporting research and education. But the danger is there that if you are blending in with the rest of the group, nobody knows that the library is doing this. So that's always going back and forth a little bit. Is that happening in your libraries as well? Changing the way that you are working together also with broader support of research and education? Maybe Siobhan or Shane first, since I saw you doing this already.
Yeah, I think you raise an interesting point about the not losing the visibility around what librarians and what libraries can deliver in our universities, and I think it's always a fine balance to get that right. I think I think it's about using different language and different ways to communicate our skills as well, and to communicate our expertise, and almost that ability to market what we do, because I think sometimes it's very easy for people not to appreciate the skills that are there available on campus in the library world as well, because we're not using maybe the right language or terminology around our skill set.
Can I add something to that as well? Because may I pose a more radical point of view? We had this discussion in Utrecht many times. And in the end, we said, so why bother? And what kind of question is this really? Is this a managerial organizational question about how do we present our added value in order to prevent ourselves from being made redundant as a library? Or do we want to use our skills and be as close to the researcher as possible in places where they are looking for information and support? And that's why we are, with many of our services, not presenting those on the library website or only linking to the place where we really want to present them, which is really close to the researchers. And it doesn't really matter that in our presentation they see that we're from the library. It's important that they get help. And afterwards we'll tell them this is the library. And also to respond to one of the questions I saw in the chat, what we would like to do with this is to translate our old skills in metadata, in making scientific output findable and accessible, etc., translate them to new forms. So yes, we have a lot of people working in Utrecht, working on data management, making data findable and accessible, etc., etc. And that's where we use our knowledge on metadata directly in new forms of research output. Yeah, so and it's up to our director to tell the story to the board of the university that we're really worth being there as a library.
There's actually one other question that's been posted in the chat that links into this topic, and that's a question by Robin Rice. How do you stop getting dragged in too far in helping the researchers or managing users' expectations around that? I mean, if you just want to help and do everything you can to help them, how do you prevent getting too much into detail?
That might be a that might be a bit of problem with when you are dealing with technical stuff, because then if you want to satisfy all the wishes, you have to kind of do a lot of things that might not be very viable for all people, only for one or two people.
Yes, that's a problem. So how do we prevent that?
So one of the things we do in Utrecht, or are trying to do, is also by making to measure the results of the teams and to have a good idea with the team and with the management on what the results are and how many people we should support. And if we see that we are dragged into one or two projects for too much time, we have to think together and the teams have to figure out how we can support those researchers in the best way possible without getting too much time into one project. So it's a very important issue raised here, and we are trying to solve this partly, for instance, by monitoring what we do and how much time it takes.
Yeah, thank you. And Markku, you wanted to react as well?
No, I already said what I.
Okay. One final reaction, because we are already within 2 minutes of the close of this session. Too many interesting topics to discuss. Let's see, is there one final question in the chat? Oh, there were a lot of questions in the chat. And there were a lot of compliments in the chat, so that's good. Let's see what's there. Oh, that's a little bit too much to get into right now. So there's another question about the assignments that the group are being taken on. Do you have a written frame assignment for the different teams in order for the group to know the scope and responsibilities? Is that what's how you work?
Well, we have a brief framework at Utrecht for the teams, but we think it's not a good example of our culture that the manager writes an assignment for a team and the team will do exactly as told. So the framework is to a large extent developed by the teams themselves and in close cooperation with us as a manager. My responsibility as a manager is to think, how does this fit into the strategy and the goals we have as a library? The teams should work to a high extent on the results themselves, and so that's the framework is to a highly extent developed in close cooperation with the teams.
Thank you very much. I think before people are starting to leave this session to get ready for our next participant meeting at our LIBER conference, we have to close here. I want to thank every one of you for giving these inspiring presentations. So many new things we've heard, too many to stop here right now. So I hope soon we'll have another opportunity to talk more about this. To all the participants, thanks for your active participation, and let's meet again very soon and discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.